All right. Cool. All right. Uh, let's hit record here. All right. James Keddington here. All right. We're on episode 2 of the Overcome and Become podcast. Reminder that we are here to help you become capable of confidently overcoming the hard stuff in life so you can ambitiously become the person you want to be. And so that's a big part of what we're doing this. And a big part of overcoming the hard stuff is physically being capable of doing that, right? If we want to confidently overcome, ambitiously become, our body's got to be able to follow where our mind and our heart and our spirit want to take us. So today's discussion is going to be on nutrition. And I've got Jesse Curtis here with me. Jesse and I have gotten to know each other. We had a chance meeting at a really cool health food store here in Salt Lake, a place that my wife and I love. And so a really cool chance meeting. We got talking, and Jesse's got a really cool health story of his own that we're going to hear about. And we're also going to hear what he's learned in process of taking care of his own health. And we're going to be talking about traditional nutrition. So you'll find out in future episodes, we're going to have a lot of discussions around nutrition. There's so much that we could talk about. You could probably have hundreds of hours of conversations, and we're not going to do that in one sitting.
Come on.
All right. So that's where we're at. So anyway, so we're just going to start off. I'm going to let Jesse introduce himself a little bit. Tell us a little bit about you, and tell us a little bit about your health journey, kind of how you got to this place where you cared about food.
Absolutely. So I was born in Utah, raised in Idaho, a little small town rural area. And I had a pretty good food upbringing. My mom, for the most part, made just about everything from scratch. Grew up fairly healthy. Went off to college and university, studied international business and outdoor recreation. While I was getting those degrees away from my mom's home cooked meals, my health started to decline quite a bit, and I wasn't used to that. I was used to like pretty flawless health, minus a couple little things, and so it was very strange for me. I think a lot of people grow up with a lot of difficulties with health, and I just wasn't used to that. So I'm like, what's going on? So I start researching like what's going on. Why am I feeling crummy all of a sudden? And read a few books. At first, not the best ones in my opinion, but they seemed to make sense. So I started to do vegetarian, vegan, all raw. I went through little increments, little test phases. And to be fair, I didn't do them real skilled. If I were to do them now, it would look very different and I could do better, and they can be decently healthy. So my health took a big turn for the worse at that point. Luckily, I stumbled onto the book, Deep Nutrition, Why Your Genes Need Traditional Food. And it's absolutely fantastic book. Turned my health around right away. I knew exactly what I needed to do. It not only seemed to make sense, but put into practice, it actually yielded great results. And so, traditional food. Let's see. And so some of those problems I was experiencing was I was getting injured more often, more easily. I wasn't healing very fast. I had terrible energy. I'd have big energy slumps and just feel like I really needed to nap or sleep during the middle of the day. It was really tough. Growing up, one thing that I didn't have growing up was really great teeth. Like I'd have cavities fairly often. And when I did this vegetarian, vegan, and all of that, it got much worse really fast. And I just have all kinds of tooth decay. Even though I'm brushing, even though I'm flossing, even though I'm doing everything that they tell you need to do, turns out a lot of tooth decay happens on the inside with blood nutrition levels. So calcium to magnesium ratios and amounts. And so anyway, all of that just took a big 180 once I started implementing traditional food.
That's crazy because I know a lot of studies show like if you like a lot of archaeological digs, you'll see a lot of indigenous peoples like with much straighter teeth,
perfect, beautiful teeth
than we will ever have here in America. And we make fun of British people, but the reality is like we just don't have great teeth. But like these people who never had fluoride in their toothpaste and these magical things and this teeth whitener. They never had any of that perfect dentures when we discovered them.
Absolutely. And with what you're normally taught in school and at the dentist, that would seem really strange and counterintuitive. After reading Deep Nutrition, it makes absolute perfect sense. And then there's another book called Cure Tooth Decay and How to Heal Your Teeth with Nutrition. And it goes into that in depth, and it shows photos of people on their traditional diet still that civilization has just now touched on where they live and on their culture, and it hasn't yet impacted them. And they just have really great physiques, strong bodies, good energy, and beautiful teeth. And this could touch on the work of Weston Price. So he was a dentist a long while back. I forget the exact period, but he saw all these teeth that weren't doing too well. And he's like, why is this happening? This doesn't seem natural. He toured around the world looking for indigenous people still on their traditional diet, hypothesizing that he'll find good health and perfect teeth if he were to find people on their traditional diet. That's what he did, and that's what he found. 14 different sets of people. He documented their teeth, documented their health, and what they're eating. And again, all of these books I'm mentioning, all this research, they all coincide. They all work together. And if you want a good place to go for all of this, it's the Weston Price Foundation, Dr. Weston A. Price Foundation.
That's cool.
Stuff, yeah.
Well, one of the reasons I was so fascinated after we first met is because you're citing all the stuff that you've learned, and it all matches up with everything that I've been learning at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition.
Cool.
The dozens of podcasts that I listen to, a few communities that I belong to that are like on Facebook or wherever, right? Where people have kind of abandoned this Western idea of food.
The food pyramid.
Yeah, the food pyramid. And they're all kind of like, I'm a pattern guy. Like, I'm not going to be like this very high level strategic thinker, but I see patterns and I see fundamentals. I'm like, oh, I see this is a pattern between these things, and this is a pattern between these things. So when we were talking, I'm like, wow, I'm starting to see more of these commonalities between what you're saying. And when you start seeing these things show up from different groups of people, and they're all independent, you're just like, okay, there's some truth. This is truth.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because this guy is not related to that guy, they're not related to that guy. And I've never even heard them reference each other in podcasts or whatever.
And they come to the same conclusion.
They're coming to the same conclusions. So we need to be talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's so important. And it's not that eating the deep nutrition way is important. What's important is that I have energy to be happy.
Right.
Right. I really don't care what I eat. I really don't. I care if I can wake up in the morning without being lethargic. I care if I can drive to work without falling asleep. I care if I come home after work and I'm not tired and I have energy to be with my kids.
You feel good.
That's what I care about, right?
Yeah.
And I think for most people it's the same way. Like, a lot of people feel like it's normal to just be like, oh, well, everyone's like this, so I'm normal that I'm just wiped by 7 p.m. I'm like, dude, I'm not wiped till like 11 p.m. Like, I'm waking up at 7 a.m. and like around 11, I'm like, okay, I think it's time to wind down. But like, I'm going like 100% that whole time.
Yeah.
Right. And I discovered like all that stuff that I had before, that's not part of getting old.
Right.
It may be for most of America because of what we've adopted as truth,
right.
But it was corporate truth. It was how to line the pocketbooks of corporations truth, right?
Absolutely.
How to support that. But it wasn't how to really be healthy. And so I'm hoping that people get out of this is that if you're feeling low energy and you feel like I need 4 rock stars in a day to have good energy, that's not normal.
It's not normal. And
it's bad.
It's bad.
And there's better ways to have more energy than what 4 rock stars could give you without spending $10 a day on rock stars and without dealing with the lows.
Mm-hmm.
they come after them, right?
Absolutely. It's not normal to not feel good. I'm a big movie quoter. I have to quote this.
Okay,
Keeps
okay,
popping up
all
in
right,
my
all
head. I don't know if you've ever seen Joe versus the Volcano.
Been a long time.
It's a Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Check it out. And there's this part near the beginning where Tom Hanks is just like to his boss, like, I don't feel good. And the boss is like, so what? Nobody feels good. You think I feel good? Nobody feels good. It's like, no, we should be feeling good. So absolutely, you know, and so many people jump straight to it and blame it on genetics.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my genes are bad, so I need 4 rock stars in a day to have enough energy. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I think I told you this earlier, and I'm not going to name names, and if this person listens to it, they know it's them that I'm talking about because it was a very distinct conversation. But we're talking about different health things, and he's like, hey, you want a soda? And I'm like, no, I've got water. And he's like, yeah, I like to drink more water, but my body's just built for soda.
Okay.
And in my mind, I'm like, no, your body wasn't built for soda. Like God wasn't like, here's the human species, and here's Fred. We're going to build him for soda.
It just doesn't make any sense.
No, that's not how it happened.
Totally.
That's not how it happened.
But
But we laugh at that. But a lot of people actually believe that about different things. I am built for this, or my body has adapted to this, or my body likes this more than other things. And it's just not true. It's acclimated to things, and you've gotten used to the crap that comes with it.
Totally. It can be your body acclimating to it, getting used to it. It can be maybe the rest of your diet's pretty decently good. Maybe you're running on healthy fats. And so it can deal with a certain amount of toxins and sugar and terrible stuff. It is having an impact on you. But again, you have a good foundation. Maybe you were raised decently well on good food, and it's taking a long time for it to show. Like it's slowly chipping away like a stone cutter at a cliff.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while before you notice. There's a quote, I think it's by Ann Wigmore, and it's that food can be the best medicine or the slowest poison. And so just because you don't feel absolutely terrible after one Dr. Pepper doesn't mean it's not doing any damage. It just means it's slow of how it chips away at you.
Dude, I love that.
Isn't that a
the
great
best
quote?
medicine or the slowest poison? That's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like the Chinese water torture.
The drop in
that little drop on the forehead, like, what is this? I could deal with this, and then after like 20 hours, like, dude, I'm gonna kill myself.
I'm insane,
right? But like over a lifetime, like we think, oh no, I can handle this, but you don't understand like how it's negatively impacted. Like my dad, right? I think this is one of the big reasons why I want, like I say, overcome and become. So my dad died of cancer, which a lot of people do, right? That's not the sad story.
Mm-hmm.
The sad part of the story is that he wasn't physically capable of even taking the medicines to fight it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what they wanted to give him would have given him a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wasn't physically capable of receiving it,
mm-hmm.
right? And I just think about like all the nights of eating ice cream. Like come home from work, eat dinner, bowl of ice cream, watch TV.
Mm-hmm.
And like the last 10 years of his life, he had like all these knots in his neck. Like he was all taking cortisone shots like every 6 months. And it's like, no, that's not like coping well with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like his body wasn't handling stress.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't able to, like we all get knots in our muscles and stuff, and that's a symptom of stress. Like we bottle something up either emotionally or stress or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But our body should be able to work stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
And just decades of bad diet, I think really
slowly
when it got to that point where like we don't know why like I've seen the healthiest people get cancer like viciously, right?
Mm.
We don't know why it always comes. But he didn't have a fighting chance.
Right.
I want a fighting chance if that day comes for me.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I want the listeners to have too. Mm-hmm. I want people to have a fighting chance when the crap hits the fan for anything, whether dramatic like cancer or just a crappy day at work.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. And
I remember like I was telling a friend this the other day, about 4 years ago, I was at work and this sister company, we shared an office with the sister company and our marketing department was helping them out. And this guy that I didn't like, we did not work in the same company, but we're like, somehow we're in this meeting. He starts kind of like pushing my hot buttons
Mhm.
about like, how do we know we can use your marketing department to help? And he started like really kind of like be negative towards us, and I lost it. When I mean I lost it, like F bombing him,
Oh,
like
wow.
yelling.
Yeah.
And afterwards, like, I was like, what happened?
Mm.
Like, that was it should have been a small moment where I just blew him off and said, dude, we need to bring in the CEO and have this conversation with him because I'm not talking about this anymore.
Mhm.
That's exactly how that should have handled.
Mm.
But I wasn't capable. Like I hadn't, like, mentally, emotionally,
You weren't on your A
socially,
game.
I wasn't strong enough to handle that situation. So something as small as a conversation at work or as big as cancer, we need to be resilient and be able to have a fighting chance. And
Absolutely.
that's what we're going for. So let's dive into more of this idea of traditional food. So give us a high level overview. What's traditional food?
So one of the biggest keys to it is quality ingredients. So the way that your ingredients are grown, harvested, fed, it all really matters a ton. If your cattle are eating genetically modified corn versus grass, versus lush green grass, it makes a huge difference in the nutrition stored in the meat, in the molecular structure. Like it really, really matters. The plants you grow, do you just have chemical fertilizer that helps the plant make the structure and it looks kind of good, it looks in basic shape, but inside it's devoid of good nutrition? It really matters the composition of the soil. So quality ingredients. So words like organic, free range, local, small farm, things like this are usually a good sign. Doesn't always mean it's the absolute best, but these are usually good signs that a ingredient is being made well.
Yeah, we were talking earlier. I I don't have like this history of like, oh, I'm gonna be the Whole Foods guy and I'm gonna be like this. I'm more like a Johnny Lawrence where I'm just like, feed me whatever comes my way, right? So when I would hear like, I remember like there's a documentary that came out about how like animals were treated, and I was like, whatever. It's an animal, right? But when you start looking at how, when you're talking about quality ingredients, like how animals are treated, right? It's not like, let's just take feelings aside, right? I know there's this like predominant thought, like, hey, in the animal kingdom, we are the dominant species. Like, we have thought, we have reason, we have all this stuff because we're supposed to go out and kill animals.
Mm.
And it's true. Like, I mean, we are the top of the food chain. I mean, I know we're not predators like lions and other animals, but we are the top of the food chain, and we are distinguished separately from the other animal kingdom
Mm.
because of a lot of the things that we inherently have, right? But biologically, we're very similar in that, how do our bodies react to stress?
Mm.
How do our bodies react to things that aren't natural environment, like injections and hormones, like, right? And so that stuff, purely from like a self-serving point of view, not like a fair treatment of animal stuff,
Mhm.
I've come to realize, oh, that's actually important.
It really is.
Like if this animal is stressed for 5 years of growing,
Mhm.
constantly stressed, its anxiety levels are up, its cortisol levels are out the roof, it has no like positive adrenaline or dopamine. What am I bringing into my body?
Absolutely. And you bring up a good point about hormones and injections. So I don't remember the exact facts and figures, but I remember there being studies and just a lot of instances where, young girls eating and drinking huge amounts of animal products that did get the, terrible injections, growth hormones. They'd grow extra fast and they'd mature extra fast and they get their period at a very young age, and it wouldn't be in like a healthy way. Like it'd be sped up, and overly fast development and growth is not a good thing, especially when caused by these unnatural hormones that are in our food. And so, like you said, sure, proper treatment of animals is one thing, but another is, how is this stuff actually affecting our bodies?
Right.
And it's predominantly not good if you're having conventionally raised animals and animal products.
Even people who grow up normally fast due to other things, like the tallest man in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We know that him, like Andre the Giant, had massive health issues,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And it, like, his genetics just made him grow that. I mean, he just had some extra things going on out of his control, but like that, even he had health issues. So if they're spurred on by things in our control, the unnatural things, that's got to be even worse, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, so that's quality on food. You talked about soil. Why does soil matter?
Yeah. So you get out of something what you put in, and so again, if you have nutrient devoid soil should have a huge complex of nutrients. Now, when you over farm the same soil over and over, farming the same crop that eats the same nutrients predominantly, those nutrients that it eats are going to become less and less and less if you're not replacing those nutrients, if you're not adding mulch and giving it a season off, or planting a different crop that eats different nutrients and rounds out the soil a bit more, or nitrogen fixing plants, all these different things. If you're not treating the soil well, it's going to become depleted, empty of the proper nutrients in it. And you can get around that by adding chemical fertilizers. So phosphorus-based chemical fertilizers that don't enrich the soil, making the plant grow really well. It just gives the plant what it needs for structure, largely phosphorus. So
what do you mean by like for structure? Does that mean for like why we see like bigger corn and it's all yellow instead of a variety of colors? Or is it other structural things you're talking about?
It's kind of like we need calcium for strong bones.
Right.
In that same way, plants need phosphorus to make good form, to make not necessarily like unnatural form, not necessarily like strangely uniform colors, just that's more like genetic modification and selective breeding. But just to make the structure, to make a plant that has a good backbone, if you will, that isn't just like flopped over and slouchy.
Okay.
To make the bone structure of a plant, it needs phosphorus like we need calcium.
Okay.
So if you just give it a few certain nutrients, a few certain chemicals, you can make a plant look good while inside it's devoid of a lot of the nutrition it would normally have. And so we talked a little bit earlier about if you have a really high quality meal from high quality ingredients, you're probably going to be paying more, but you're probably going to have good energy for longer. You're probably going to feel more satiated. It's going to do better for you. You're going to have less cravings after that because you're not missing out on an over farmed nutrient that's not in the soil anymore. You eat your meal and you're like, man, I still really need something because it's missing those nutrients. So soil, just like us getting a rounded diet of many different food groups, plants need many different nutrients in the soil. And there's ways to get around that, and you need to be aware of that.
Yeah, when I brought up earlier how I see patterns and stuff, and I talked about this when we were preparing, but for the listeners, part of the soil is we have like these mega farms that all they do is corn, or all they do is wheat, or all they do is soy, or whatever it is, right? And as a result, they're not exposed to a diverse environment. And that diversity allows them to be strong, right? Like there's this old saying, like, just let the kids play in the dirt, right? Like the dirt doesn't hurt them, it actually makes them stronger. Let them eat the dirt, right?
Let them get exposed.
And I think we joke about that, but there's actually a lot of truth to it. In that, and the same thing applies to the plants we grow. If they're not exposed to a diverse environment, they're not required to defend themselves.
It's like they get a weak immune system.
They get weak immune systems. They're not required to defend. They're not required to become strong internally, and that gets passed on to us. Like we're down that food chain. So now we're taking in food that is weak, that it isn't capable of fighting infection because it's never had to. So now we're taking it in, and we're like, oh, why do I get sick all the time?
Totally. And along with it not getting strong and developing some of the things that would normally develop, if it's being stress tested, it's also absorbing all of these fungicides and pesticides that are keeping the foreign things away, that are protecting it from fungus, from bugs that want to eat it. And so it's absorbing these things, these poisons that kill fungus, that kill pests, So it's weak and it's full of poisons and toxins from what we're spraying on,
Yeah.
and devoid of those nutrients that should be in the soil.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me like when people like go to indigenous tribes, they limit like indigenous travel because of disease we can take, right? Because they kind of live in this bubble where they're not surrounded by stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's similar to like the food we're growing is grown in a bubble. And then we bring it into our environment where we go outside and we're breathing in bad air, we have stress, we have other foods, and now we're just killing that stuff right off the bat and it doesn't even serve us. Right?
We're eating bubble boy food.
We're eating bubble food. Yes, bubble boy food.
Bubble plant food.
I like that. Yeah. So, all right. So, a couple of the other things we talked about that.
Quality ingredients.
Like you talked about, like the fake ingredients too, like avoiding some of the stuff that's just like. So we know that like having quality food is important, if not for the animal or the plant, for us, right? Where it's coming from. But we also need to talk about like what is like markers of stuff that's not good for us. Like how to identify like things that are bad.
Absolutely. And what I called it earlier was nutritional landmines.
Yeah.
How to avoid those. How to avoid the things that are really going to do the most damage. And so I'll start with one that is thrown around a lot and won't be a huge surprise. So MSG, monosodium glutamate. When this is naturally occurring in its natural form, what this is mimicking is like a flag. It's like a marker in food that signals, hey, there's great nutrition here. You should eat this.
Okay, hold on. We're going to do a timeout. Okay. Isaac, you better be listening. Isaac's my second son. He's always mocking my wife for avoiding MSG. Listen up, boy. All right.
And while it is common, it's certainly...
You too, Matt. You also join in on the fun of making fun of mom. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Certainly not everyone's unified in it, but if you really look deep, I would say it's pretty conclusive. So MSG, not good. But in its natural form, it's a marker to say, hey, it's to signal the taste buds. This is good stuff. Eat more of it. And so this is going to be like your umami taste in a steak. If you haven't heard that term, it's like the sixth taste on the taste buds. It's just this really intense, good flavor, similar to savory, but not exactly savory.
So they added in to make us crave whatever they're making.
Right. Yeah. It's like fake umami, and so it's funny. It sounds like umami, but it's different. So anyway, so it's this fake marker, and they can just kind of synthesize it, just make it and sprinkle into food. So if you take MSG out of, say, like a protein bar or something similar to like a granola bar in the store that you unwrap to eat, typically if you take that out, it's going to taste like cardboard. So like it's making these things taste good, and you can make it
cardboard.
And it's wrapped up in flavoring too. So a lot of times on packages, not always, but most of the time when you see natural flavors on ingredient lists, it's MSG, usually made in such a way that it makes it taste like something else. And so like a meat flavored.
So it's a natural flavor, but not a flavor from a natural source.
So you can call anything natural because everything at some point came from something natural.
That's true.
It's like how you can call any salt a sea salt because at some point it was in a sea at some point. That's absolutely true. So if you buy a sea salt, doesn't make it good. You need to find unprocessed, unrefined salt.
Yeah.
So anyway, so it's not a natural flavor, but they can call it a natural flavor, and it's just so people don't see MSG on the label.
They see it and they freak out because of like Chinese food back in the 80s and 90s.
Totally, yeah. So anyway, so MSG, not good. It's an excitotoxin. It'll stimulate your brain, and it will make you crave the thing because it's got that marker saying, hey, there's good nutrition here, but then actually there isn't. It's a false marker when we insert it into food. So another one,
So how do we know, like, it says natural flavor, how do we know that? Should we just assume that it's MSG?
Typically, you should just assume it's MSG. Now, an example where it's not MSG is at Redmond's, so at Farm Kitchen, where we have the Relight. That's something that says natural flavors.
Not a paid promo, but
not a paid promo.
If you're in Salt Lake area, Northern Utah, Redmond's. Okay,
that's right, real salt. That natural flavors is a much better thing, I believe, and it's not MSG. So it also goes by, sometimes if it says spices on an ingredient list, that's also often MSG.
Okay.
And so it's tough, but basically look for organic, look for quality made, look for where is the flavor coming from. If it's like, I don't know why this tastes good, that's suspect. If it says natural flavors, it's probably coming from this little powder that they make in a lab that is a fake marker. All right, so did I answer your question?
Yeah. So I think we've had a good discussion on like the quality ingredients, right? Is there anything you wanted to tap into?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I see this page. Like I gotta
we
think
can't
of
move
something.
on yet. So really briefly, white sugars, processed sugar.
Oh yeah, yeah.
White processed salt. These are more unnatural things that we've created to, again, try to signal the body there's good stuff here, and really it's not very good. Now, more importantly, vegetable oils, also goes by the name commercial seed oils. These are very fragile oils that are extracted out of seeds, out of corn, out of soybeans, that as soon as you extract it with high heat and pressure, which they almost always do, and then you do the bleaching, and like there's this huge list of what they do to these oils. They're immediately bad. They're terrible. Some of the main ones is soy oil, corn oil, safflower, sunflower. What am I missing? I say corn, canola, corn. These are all really terrible. They're very highly inflammatory, and
I don't know if this is true. I heard it somewhere, didn't verify it, but it was from a good source. But I feel like kind of the origin of this is that coming out of like the Depression or World War I, World War II, that these oils actually are a byproduct of the paint processing. That they had all this oils left over from paint, and they're like, oh, this is just oil that we could cook with now.
Very possible it comes from there too, where the main origin that I'm aware of is Procter and Gamble. It was
a reputable company. I'm just kidding. Sorry, that is not defamation. That was purely speculation and opinion. I'm not stating that as fact. I buy Procter and Gamble products, just not all. All right.
Back in the day, Procter and Gamble. This is around 1880s, and they're high into cotton. So they're getting cotton, and a byproduct of cotton and cotton seeds is the cotton seed oil. And it was just like a toxic byproduct. And like, what do we do with this? I don't know. And then slowly they were able to work it into the animal feed supply as a lipid, as a fat, as an oil. And then they started to fit it into the human diet, and they'd make things like Crisco out of it, and these hydrogenated fats, these hydrogenated fake fats and oils. And around that time, so this is around 1910s, I believe, is when it started to get into the food system. And then around 1940s, 50s, then you have the cholesterol scare, the fat, animal fat scare, and everyone's like, oh, that's going to clog your arteries. They took studies, they fed people these vegetable oils, they saw the terrible heart illnesses coming from those, and then they said that it was from animal fats, but really it was from the vegetable fats. So around the start of the 1900s, slowly health declining. And then around that time, like, oh, it's from animal fats.
So this is the same time, just to give people an idea, this is the same time that they were running ads saying 8 out of 10 doctors recommend Camel cigarettes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I just want to give the mindset of where advertising was at then.
Mm-hmm.
That it was like same companies were also saying these things that we now know are ridiculous,
mm-hmm.
but somehow these oils haven't permeated to that point where we're like, those were just dumb lies or just ignorant people.
Right. Oils are finally coming out. More and more people are finding out about seed oils. Around the same time, so these are these colorful, fun ads with doctors like, hey, I'm smoking, And at the same time, you've got Crisco, and you got this like cute little housewife, and it's like civilized families use Crisco instead of lard, instead of pig fat. And it's like they totally demonized animal fats that we ran on for so long.
Right.
And you got this new product that they have a ton of, because it's a big byproduct, and they're trying to sell it to the masses. And they did a good job.
And I'll be honest, if you make your pancakes after you make your bacon, it tastes so much better.
Oh yeah.
Like let's just bypass the natural aspect of it. Your pancake flavor is so much better. So much better.
And it's for good reason. It's a marker. It's a true marker, a natural marker saying there's good nutrition here. Pig fat, Awesome. Good stuff.
Okay. All right.
All right. So, there's my soapbox. Seed oils are terrible. You want natural, traditional fats and oils, quality olive oil, avocado oil, lard, tallow. That's, of course, pig fat and cow fat, butter, cream, ghee, these delicious things that we were trained to think are going to clog our arteries. And it's the opposite. They clean up our arteries. It's the seed oils that destroy them. And so there we go. Okay. There's 2 done.
This is, I mean, I know we could keep going on forever on all this stuff. Let's talk about some pillars. So you introduced me to, there's 4 core pillars of traditional food.
Yes.
And I think we're calling them like, these are the
4 pillars of the
world,
human diet.
Of human diet, world cuisine.
World cuisine, same thing. It's what all of humanity has been doing for the past many hundreds of years.
And let's, for context, like, I understand that like learning and knowledge is important, right? And like we learn and we grow and we're able to do things better. But when it comes to like evolution, like evolution happens over the course of millions of years, but our food diet has changed in 120 years.
Rapidly.
So rapidly,
and we
right?
Can't keep up.
So even though some of these advancements in food technology may be proven to be good at some point, I have doubts that our bodies have advanced at the same pace.
Absolutely.
I think in the Huberman Lab podcast, he was saying the only real human evolution that we've seen advance at the same pace is writing words with our thumbs, and that's come from texting. But on all of human development, writing never happened with our thumbs, but now we're writing with our thumbs. So, but that's the only one he knows of, and he's like one of the most brilliant minds in this human development world right now. So anyways, just kind of for those who are like, no, science is good, the development's good. Yes, it's good, but in context of how we evolve and the pace we evolve, let's remember that when we're considering these 4 pillars, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what are the 4 pillars?
Yeah. So the 4 pillars of the human diet. And so this comes from Deep Nutrition by Dr. Kate Shanahan. And so it's the 4 steps.
I want to hear an Irishman say, Kate Shanahan.
Kate Shanahan. She's a good one. You're going the right way for our smack bottom.
All right. I'm going the right way. Okay. All right. Let's talk about this.
Shanahan. So, great. So, if you go way, way back to, our primal diets, we're more just grabbing things and eating them. And plants have defenses. They have toxins, phytotoxins, so plant poisons to defend themselves. And if you look at most animals, they don't have a very long lifespan. They don't have ways to disarm these toxins, these anti-nutrients that attack the body. And so a cow is going to go out and graze on one type of crop, and its tongue is going to start to tell it, hey, we're getting too toxic in a particular anti-nutrient, particular poison in this food. You need to go graze on something else. And so it goes to graze on something else. And then there's going to be remedies for that toxin in some other plants, but then other plant toxins it's going to eat there. And so no matter where it goes, it's going to get some resistance to its health. And that's why a lot of animals don't live that long. So
quite a lot of foods are bitter, right? It's kind of their defense mechanism.
Yeah, and
although bitter is an indicator of poison, but it's an indicator that plants do have defense mechanisms for survival.
Right. Our tongues can taste bitter primarily so that we can know something is poisonous and stop eating it. Now, it's a bit more complex than that, but that's the main thing, because a lot of poisons are bitter to the taste. So, so then fast forward a bit, humans, do that a bit. And then over time, with our thumbs and our intellect, we figure out how to cook. We figure out how to pluck off certain things. We figure out how to skin certain things. We figure out how to take the seeds out of certain things. We figure out how to more skillfully avoid the poisons, the toxins, the anti-nutrients, to be able to live longer. We have less resistance against our health because we're skillfully preparing our food to be eaten. And that's a form of technology. Technology is, I forget the exact definition, but I love it. But if you look at it, that's absolutely a type of technology, is learning how to do something better for a better outcome. I kind of butchered a little bit, but anyway. So we learn to do that, and we pass that on over time through tradition, through telling our next generation, hey, this is how we do it. And if we do it this way, we do better. We don't know all, they didn't even know the word science at that point. We don't know why, but we notice it happens. And so passing that on through tradition, passing on this technology, that's traditional food. That's learning that if you soak your oatmeal in yogurt and water overnight and then cook it and then add butter and syrup, it's going to do so much better for you than just straight cooking oatmeal, because it's got enzyme inhibitors, it's got phytic acid, which we can dive into these things, but these are things that are going to fight your body. In fact, I'll jump in real quick. Enzyme inhibitors are something that keep a seed from germinating and turning into a plant too soon. It's going to wait until there's moisture, and then those enzyme inhibitors are going to slough off. But if you don't do that, and they're with the food when you eat it, it's going to inhibit your own digestive enzymes, and it's gonna make digestion harder. You can still eat oatmeal if you don't soak it. It's gonna be better if you do. And then we won't get into phytic acid, but that's why my teeth were so bad as a kid and got much worse when I did my little food journey. And then after I figured out what the problem was and got the current issues fixed, I haven't needed dental intervention in 9 years. I haven't had new tooth decay that required drilling in 9 years.
That's amazing.
When I would have, every time I went to the dentist, I had 3 or 4 when I was a kid. Now I know why. Now it makes total sense. So passing on this knowledge, and so we can divide this knowledge, the main components, into 4 groups of strategies for preparing the food to make it more bioavailable, more nutritious, and less damaging to the body.
So let's cover what those are. And for those watching, we were taking in natural sunlight, and now the sun's going down, so I'm going to flip on the lights in the room.
Do you want me to jump right in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just keep going.
So the first pillar of world cuisine, this is meat cooked on the bone and bone broth.
Yeah.
So the bones and the joints have a lot of really great nutrients in them that, especially here in the U.S., we don't typically utilize. We cut the meat off of the bone and then cook it, and we don't get these joint and bone nutrients coming out into the meat, coming out into the soup, coming out into the sauce. We miss out, and a lot of cultures still use the bones, still get it, and we don't. Also, bone marrow can also fit into this category. Then you have the second pillar is organ meats and the other parts of the animals. So liver, many consider liver to be one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. Again, we don't utilize those here in the U.S. usually. I found them in some restaurants. You have to really look hard. At that store we were talking about, Redmond's, we have them there. We've got all kinds of nasty bits in the freezer for people to dive into. So nutrient variety. If you're just getting muscle meat, you're not getting the amazing things in the liver that are there to disarm toxins and cleanse the body. A lot of people think the liver is there to store toxins. That's not true. It's there to neutralize toxins. Many parts of the body that have great nutrients in them. So number 3 is soaked, sprouted, fermented. And this is referring to strategies that are there to help prepare seeds, grains, nuts, legumes, all these things. Basically, all of these have enzyme inhibitors, so they need to be soaked and rinsed. You can keep rinsing them and sprout them, and they turn more into a plant, and they unpack their nutrients.
So let's what's an enzyme? What is an inhibitor, and why do we not want that?
Sure. So an enzyme is something, it's like a key that unlocks a nutrient, and so or helps break it down. So for example,
so it gives it its power for us.
It takes so we have enzymes in our stomach, digestive enzymes, right? Yeah. And they're keys. They're a big group of keys that they can change, and they're different ones to unlock different types of nutrients. Okay. Some more unlock proteins, some unlock sugars, and some are naturally occurring in our food.
So we need these enzymes to get the most out of these nutrients. But if there's inhibitors in what we're eating, then we're not going to unlock the potential of the food we're eating.
Right, and it's going to take a lot more energy to digest. So our body can produce all kinds of enzymes, but it takes energy. It takes other nutrients. Right. And so if we can reduce the fight before the food gets in, we're going to use up less energy to digest food, and we're going to digest it better.
A lot of that energy, especially in the digestion process, people talk about like IBS, right? Mm-hmm. So when we're unnecessarily creating stress in the digestion process. We'll get into this later, but inflammation occurs.
Yeah.
And this is where the chronic illness comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So preparing our food in a way that kind of helps in that digestion process, or what I'm learning now from you, getting rid of those inhibitors, enzyme inhibitors, allows us to free ourselves or reduce barriers that might be creating a lot of those chronic illness and other situations for us.
Absolutely. Since we've dug into this a little, let me talk about two really important things that fit into this. So at this store, Redmond's, we buy raw milk. And so the raw milk has its enzymes intact. We haven't heated the milk. And so the enzyme is lactase. Lactase is specifically there to break down lactose. Lactose is the milk sugar. And so you got the key to unlock the milk sugar and digest it more easily. Now, most milk out there has been cooked, and as soon as you cook something, all the enzymes die. All the keys go away, and a lot of times the sugar or the protein becomes even harder to digest. It kind of constricts, and it's harder to break down. So a lot of people get lactose intolerant, where they can't digest
because
lactose.
they don't have the lactase.
Because they don't have lactase, and the lactose is maybe in a more difficult form to digest.
So it's not that they're lactose intolerant, it's that they're lactase insufficient. They're insufficiently lactase.
Potentially. And some people take lactase pills when they drink conventional milk so that they can digest it. If they're lactose intolerant, if they just take lactase, a lot of times they do pretty okay.
I don't want to know this because I like being lactose intolerant because it keeps me from the ice cream that I'm emotionally tied to when I think of my dad.
Talk to me later, and there's some other ways we can do well with that.
And I want to let's go to the last pillar, because I want to come back to this idea real fast on things like milk, because there's a lot of health gurus out there that will say something like, we're the only species that drinks the milk of another species, right? As their argument for why we shouldn't drink milk.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to that, but I want to hit on this fourth.
Let's make a note of that, because I loved it. Real quick, we're the only species that cooks. Should we stop cooking? I don't think so. But there's more. There's a lot more to it, and I could definitely tackle that one. But
that's actually a really good rebuttal. Okay.
There's a lot of things that we do that no other species does. Doesn't mean we should stop. We're pretty cool. There's something we should stop, but not okay. All right, number 4 is fresh. And fresh means several things. Fresh means trying to not wait too long from harvesting your plant, your meat, whatever, before you eat it. So not going grocery shopping once every 2 weeks and letting your vegetables sit and letting the nutrition decline and the food die more and more before you eat it. Now, I'm certainly not perfect at this, and
right,
and
it's hard because of the availability, right?
It's really hard. So I spent many years in China. I don't know if I told you.
No.
I spent many years in China, and in China, they still have such a great traditional food core and structure and habits. They have these things called wet markets, and wet markets are like farmers markets, but they're open basically all the time, and there's particularly in the morning. And so in China, it's very common for the older generation to live with you after they get, a bit older in age. And they, early in the morning, go to the wet market, buy fresh ingredients that a lot of times were harvested that day, dug out of the dirt that day. A lot of times live seafood. They'll bring home a bag of kicking shrimp, and they'll kill them and cut the heads off and cut the legs off themselves. So fresh food. And then they'll cook it according to tradition. And then people come home for lunchtime or come home for dinner, and they've got this traditional food fresh from the market that day. Next day, they do it again. They go to the market the next day. They go like daily. Many of them don't have fridges. If they do have fridges, usually it's pretty small, and they don't pack it very much. It's for a couple of condiments, But their foods are just so fresh almost all the time.
It's crazy to bring that up because my wife has a lot of food sensitivities. She kind of told you a little bit about them. We went to Ecuador, spent 3 weeks in Ecuador, and everywhere we go when we eat in the U.S., my wife will be like, what's in this? What's in that? What's in this? She needs to know the ingredient list because she'll get really sick, really bad. And in Ecuador, one of the language barrier prevented us from asking that because there's not words for like processed salt. There's just salt. There's just this. There's just that.
You know what I mean? MSG and gluten, maybe not words, or they're not widely known.
Right. So there's just not words. But here's the thing: she didn't get sick once.
Oh wow. Cool.
Not a single one. Part of it is because in most of the world they've banned GMOs. most of the world, the United States is one of the few countries, United States, Canada, a few others, that actually allow GMOs, or genetically
Right, that's-
modified organisms, right? So that's interesting, right? But the other is same principle, is that because it's on the equator, fruit and vegetables just grow like crazy there, right? It's like the ideal environment. It's ideal. It's just perfect place for growing good stuff. So every time we ate something, it was food that was at most a week harvested,
and probably fully ripened before they pick it. Which,
right?
If something's not local, they're gonna pick it way before it's ripe, and then spray it with stuff to try to make it ripen.
And here, here, I was blown away. Like about 10 years ago, I was thinking of making a guacamole company, like making guacamole, and I went to buy avocados at a produce place here. And I go into the fridge where they're like, yeah, we'll show you all the avocados we got. And I'm like, well, these aren't even ripe. It's like, oh, we'll gas them like 2 days before you want them.
We'll gas
and
them.
they'll be ripe for you to use.
We'll gas them.
No, and this is what they do for the grocery stores. Like literally, they pick them way early, way before they're ready to be eaten. They keep them in an unnatural environment so they don't ripen. And then when they're ready to be sold, they gas them so they ripen really fast.
This is interesting because the gas, of course, is going to have toxic things in it, but also plants will also have more toxic things and more difficult to eat structures and less fully matured nutrients before they're ripe, before the seeds are ready. Because a lot of plants, especially like fruit, they want their seeds to get eaten so that they get dumped out somewhere in some good fertilizer and then grow. And so they don't want to be eaten too soon. So they've got extra phytotoxins, extra plant poisons to protect themselves. And we pick it at that point. We pick it before those toxins switch to something else.
Right.
And so we're eating the plant toxins at their most potent, most likely, because the plant's like, wait, I'm not ready. It's not fully done, so don't eat me yet. And then later it turns sweet, and it's like, okay, now I'm ready. Now eat it.
It's like a banana. Like the more yellow it gets, the sweeter it gets, the more appealing it is, right?
Yeah. Appealing.
But no, that's not to say that like, oh crap, I shouldn't go eat the fruit in the grocery store. No, eat it. But if you have opportunities to go to a farmer's market, like in the summertime, take advantage of those opportunities. Oftentimes, the organic sections at a grocery store, sometimes they're priced less. Sometimes they're priced more, but sometimes it's the same, right? Like where we shop, the peppers are the same, right? And so, like, don't be afraid of like the food there. Don't avoid it, but do the work to find out what you can get.
Yeah, and try to go more often. So maybe it's not the absolute freshest and best in the grocery store, but hey, it's food. But if you just go once every 2 or 3 weeks, then it's going to get really old as you wait to eat it. And so going more often will make it more fresh because you're getting it when they get it, you eat it soon, it's better. Right. So anyway, so the fourth one is fresh in that way of from when it was harvested, but it has another.
That includes meat too, right? From when you kill it too, right?
Yeah, I mean you don't.
There's ways to preserve it, but shouldn't you want as soon as possible too?
Typically, yeah, we're gonna frozen soon. Freshness plays into meat products as well. Yes. Now you can also ferment them, or you can kind of let them sit for longer. There's aged meat. Right. There's pastrami. There's different things. There's caveats to everything, but yeah, in general, you think about when was this animal product harvested as well. Now, fresh also refers to eating raw foods, and that's both plant and animal products. So certain plants are great to eat raw, at least sometimes. Some are not. So let me first. So an example of something that's not great to have raw often is cabbage. Cabbage has naturally occurring neurotoxins as a phytotoxin, as a plant poison to protect itself from overgrazing. So you don't want raw cabbage a lot. And if you think about it, it's kind of gross. If you eat a lot of raw cabbage, it tends to taste bitter because there's poison in it.
Yeah.
Now, better is to ferment the cabbage or just cook it. If you cook it, it's much, much better. But if you ferment it, it's even better than that, and it neutralizes those neurotoxins. And so then that's sauerkraut. Fermented cabbage is sauerkraut, and that's part of why they do it. Other things to have raw. Cucumber is great. Tomatoes can be good. Lettuce, soft lettuce. I don't really advocate raw kale. Kale's so hard to chew, so hard to digest. It's like going and eating grass and expecting to get much out of it. We're not really made for that. Cows are more made for that. We're not as much. They have 4 stomachs. They have really robust teeth. Our teeth are going to probably break down before we get much out of it. So those are some of the plants. There's lots of things. So think of tender plants in a salad, avocado, things like that. Now, plant products, people might be surprised to hear that you should have those raw sometimes. But again, raw milk, having those active enzymes, raw egg yolks, sunny side up egg. I take raw egg yolks and just throw them in my milk and blend them up and drink a smoothie out of it. Raw meat. So a dish very common around the world is something called steak tartare, and it's basically just raw ground beef. It could be bison meat, and you lightly warm it. You mix it with melted butter and honey and cayenne, and oftentimes it's had with a raw egg yolk, and you might spread it on sourdough toast. And I make this myself quite often. I really like it. I used to have it really, really often. I need to get back into it. But if you're careful, if it's high quality ground beef, so it's organic, it's grass fed, it's been frozen for at least 14 days to kill any potential parasites. And then you thaw it, and very soon after, you mix it with those things, you put on sourdough toast, you eat it. It's quite safe. I wouldn't do this with your average run-of-the-mill Walmart ground beef that's been sitting there a while. Conventionally raised, that's kind of scary, and you could hurt yourself. So know your meat. So those are the 4 pillars.
That's pretty cool. All right, so we'll make this part quick. It's kind of a side note. So the people who say it's not natural for us to eat some of these things, in general, I think you summed it up really well with your other comment about we're also the only ones that cook. What are some of your other thoughts about people who are anti-dairy, anti-meat in general?
Yeah. So the 4 pillars of the human diet are something that our recent ancestors have been doing for a very long time.
Recent meaning like over
several hundreds of years
right
before us. Like food got better and better and better until we hit probably around the 1900s, and then it started to take a big decline with seed oils, the MSG, the refined salt, sugar, all that kind of stuff. And those hit maybe different times, but around then is when it started getting real bad, and we started to forget our roots. So anyway, I think it's Michael Pollan. He might be quoting someone else, but I heard him say, and take it for what it's worth, mankind happened when apes learned to cook. Now, I'm not going to say that's literally true. Everyone has their own beliefs, but it's really amazing that humans are able to break down food with heat to become easier to eat, softer, more digestible, more bioavailable. That's amazing. Now, think of another animal trying to eat the milk of another animal. Like, they don't have thumbs. They don't make clay pots to put the milk in. Now, first of all, I'll say I'm pretty sure there are predators that will kill an animal, and that animal will have milk from breastfeeding, and I bet it will eat and drink that. It's beside the point. But
that might also be the appealing part of it too.
Yeah, and so the key that I want to get to is we have a lot of health problems nowadays that came from going wrong with food in the past, and people wrongly attribute it to certain things. So a lot of vegetarians and vegans will say all of our health problems are from eating meat. We've been doing that for a really long time, long before we had all these health problems. So that doesn't sound quite right. Mass spread lactose intolerance outside of certain Asian populations is a very new thing. We've been drinking milk for a very long time. We didn't have much issue with it. It came about more and more as we started to cook milk. And so it's not that we started to drink milk. No, we've been doing that a long time. We started to cook it, and we started to feed the animals that are producing the milk genetically modified sugary corn, which they wouldn't normally have for that milk. And soy. And soy is a whole thing on its own of how damaging it is. and it's even damaging in the foods produced by the things eating it. So many people are allergic to eggs, and a lot of times many people believe it's from soy being in the feed and those molecules getting into the eggs. Same with milk, feeding your cows soy, that getting into the milk, and that making it harder to digest.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, so let's see.
So basically, what you're saying is it's true because of what we've done to this, but if we go back in time in the way we treat our milk and our meat and our other foods, and we prepare them in this traditional way, we're not going to see that same consequences.
Right. If you take good care of your animals, you're feeding what they should be eating. You don't have them in constant terror. You don't give them soy and genetically modified things, and you don't cook the milk and it's in its natural form.
Right.
It's very unlikely that you're going to have an issue. And yeah, whereas if you're drinking conventional milk, of course, it's very likely you're going to have issues for many of the reasons we've talked about already. So there's many things humans do that other species don't. That doesn't make it inherently wrong. We're intelligent. We realize, oh, this animal's producing a substance purely to nourish another being. This is called milk. We can hijack that for better or for worse, and use it for ourselves. And we can do it just straight drinking it, and that can be really great. We can make it even better by fermenting it and lowering the sugar content by fermenting it into yogurt, into kefir, into sour cream. It's amazing what we can do, and a lot of animals don't do that, and that doesn't make it bad.
That's awesome. All right, let's talk about the impact of food. We're going to talk about, this is maybe not so much specifically around traditional food, but just food in general.
Okay.
But for those listening in or watching, I want you to consider the quality aspect. So when we talk about quality being important, this is going to be a very important part of the next segment of our discussion. And that's the impact of food on a few things. One, our ability to function, our body's ability to function the way it should, meaning fight off disease, heal itself, be resilient against infection and bad things, and then to do what we want to do the way we want to do them, like enjoy our hobbies, right? So is our body operating the way we want it to? And we talked earlier about we've been acclimated to a subpar way of living, but we think it's normal, so we just accept it, but we don't have to. And then also the impact of food on things like mental health and emotional health and relationships, right? So let's talk about our physical body's function, the impact of food. We've talked a little bit about inflammation before. Inflammation, so many doctors are saying this, and there's so much science behind this. If you are a doubter in this category right now, you just need to change your mind, because this is to deny this now. To denying it 10 years ago, you might have had a reason to doubt. But today, you're kind of, you got your head in the sand if you say that inflammation does not cause chronic disease or chronic illness. Inflammation is the cause of almost every chronic disease and illness out there, if not all of them. I think one Dr. Hyman said all but like one, I think. And I can't remember what that one is. But so let's talk about inflammation. What is inflammation?
Absolutely. So inflammation, what it ought to be, so I believe the literal translation is something like internal fire. And it really does act like an internal fire. Now, on the very, very small scale, the way it should work in the body sends a little extra blood, a little extra warmth, a little extra nutrition to try to heal a certain area where there's problems. Now, inflammation, the way we've been using it just now, we're talking about overactive inflammation in the wrong places, in the wrong amounts. It's just this big fire that pops up in the body, maybe systemically, maybe in a big area of the body. And it is so a free radical. Oh, how into this do we want to get?
I don't want to go deep, but you kind of remind me of like an analogy. Like if you get like hitting the eye, you're going to receive inflammation around your eye. Right? Because your body's protecting that organ, which I just learned the other day. Your eyes are actually a physical part of your brain, which is crazy that we have we have exposed brain, right? But like your body's swelling up around the area to protect it so it can heal and not have to worry about getting poked or dirt in there or anything else, right? But if our eye were to stay swollen shut for months on end, that would suck.
Yeah.
I mean, for a few days is one thing, right? Okay, cool, I'm healing. But at a very micro level, when we're staying inflamed, when you're saying over-inflammation, that's essentially what we're doing to other aspects of our body is if you're not okay with your eye being swollen shut for months on end, you shouldn't be okay with constant inflammation in other parts of your body that you can't see.
Right. That's going to impede your life. It's going to inhibit your life. It's going to throw off your depth perception. It's bad for you long term. Now, that's the same thing happening in various parts of the body. And at first, you might not notice, and it gets worse and worse. So inflammation, I keep wanting to talk about free radicals and the chemical structures around that. But basically, there are certain nutrients that your body uses to have a healthy amount of inflammation, of extra blood flow, of healing and that sorts of things. And then there's certain foods that add extra amounts of chaos to your body. And so we'll go to seed oils, and I'll try to make this brief and lowish level, but
if you haven't gotten the message, stay away from seed oils.
So seed oils, an oil, a fat, it's the same thing. It's a lipid. And
since we're here, let's talk about some oils that are good, just not, so people aren't freaking out, because avocados have seeds, but that's not a seed oil.
So you don't
olive, right? So olive oil is good. Avocado oil is good.
Those two, the oil doesn't come from the seed.
Right. Same with coconut oil, right?
Right. It doesn't come from the seed.
So 3 very common oils, easy to get anywhere, totally legit.
And easy to make at home. You press olives and maybe like mash them up a bit. The oil comes to the top. You scoop that off. You have olive oil. Now try to make cottonseed oil. Good luck.
Family night, people. Get the kids. No, they'll hate you forever.
And then do all the other processes.
That's a good way to ruin family relationships.
Totally. So, so carbon chain, oils have a carbon chain, and there's hydrogen attached on the carbon chain. If you have carbon on all of it, that's a fully saturated oil. It's likely to be solid at room temperature. Butter is largely saturated. Lard is largely saturated. Now, if you're missing one of those hydrogen molecules, you've got a little space for a molecular bond. It's very, very small, and it's very hard to squeeze in there. And so oxygen coming along can't link on and what am I looking for? Oxidize the oil. So this is olive oil. Olive oil is very hard to become oxidized, very hard to go bad. Now, if 2 are missing, that's polyunsaturated, that's seed oils. They've been extracted as byproducts to get away from other things. And then we're like, hey, what can we use this for? Oh, the average person doesn't know that this is a fragile oil and oxygen is going to come and cling on. And then when you eat that oil, oxygen bursts off and it needs another electron, and it's going to go steal from another molecule. It's going to bust those apart, and then they each need an electron, and they go and steal from other ones. And before you know it, you have a zombie apocalypse of electron-hungry molecules and atoms, and they're going to tear apart the cellular structure in your body. On a cellular level, you're going to get torn apart until you get enough antioxidants. This is something with plenty of electrons. They're like, hey, you have an electron. You have an electron. And it cools down that inflammation. It puts out that fire. And so free radical, not enough electrons. It's unstable. It's stealing from other things. And then they steal and they steal. Antioxidants, it has what everyone's stealing and it gives it to it. So if you're not having a lot of fresh foods to get antioxidants, you can't deal with these molecular fires nearly as fast. And if you're eating tons of seed oils, you're starting those fires all the time. So
for those who like ditched chemistry, like me,
sorry,
right?
It's hard to explain.
Basically, what we're saying is, you're going to correct me because I know I'm going to butcher this, but things like seed oils,
Mhm.
they're typically they're byproducts of another manufacturing process,
Mhm.
meaning they've been changed and
Mhm.
they're a byproduct. They're like a redheaded stepchild. So, sorry to all the redheads. They're the runt of the litter. They're the something that nobody wanted, and they're like, how do we make money off this instead of spending money to dispose of it?
Right, and they've gone bad in the process.
They've gone bad in the process, so they don't serve our ability on the body level, right? We need to, inflammation is going to happen no matter what.
Mhm.
But our body needs to be able to heal from that inflammation process. And if it's not doing that, then those oils and those things really aren't serving a purpose, or they're not allowing our body to come in and heal.
Yeah, and let me try to summarize like this: inflammation, food, food caused inflammation in the body is like a molecular grass fire in the body that you need lots of fresh foods, fresh quality foods to put out. And if you don't, and if you're starting those fires often, they tear up the body on a molecular level and they break apart your bonds. And your body can't communicate with itself. Think about a house on fire and one house, one office trying to communicate with another room and trying to yell across this fire. It's not going to go very well. Your body is very complex. And if it's got these chemical fires, these molecular fires going on, you're going to have improper development. You're going to have improper storage of fat. You're going to have premature aging, more wrinkles, all these different things. And so, yeah, so molecular grass fire induced by poor quality foods.
So, on that same vein, the impact of food is that's performing that function where we have the healthy part of the inflammation to protect and to kind of put out some fires. But if we don't have quality nutrients coming in to help our body heal, then the inflammation stays.
Yeah, or at least the damage stays.
The damage stays, right?
Yeah.
And then it just kind of builds on itself and escalates and finally hits like what some might call like a flywheel effect where it just gains momentum, right?
Mm-hmm. And especially if you're eating those same damaging foods, yes, the inflammation is going to stay and worsen, and it'll go in waves. You know, your body will have some backup nutrients in your marrow to try to put it out. As you get older and you use up your nutrient reserves in your marrow and your fat, you can put out those fires slower and slower and slower, so they do more and more damage before they go out. Before you know it, you're off the deep end and there's no coming back.
Yeah. So some common foods that are really bad that promote inflammation are what?
Refined processed white sugar, commercial seed oils, vegetable oils. Let's see, what else? Inflammation. So gluten. So
Yeah.
we almost touched on gluten a little while ago. So gluten is a storage form nutrient. It's packed up nice and tight. It's very hard to get at. Normally, it should only be a little bit damaging, but the more you're exposed to it and the less you're able to deal with it, and the more you have it with seed oils and sugar, the more the body extra learns to extra resist it and extra overreact about it. Even when the seed oils and sugar aren't there, it might still react really hard to it because it's a habit. It's like, oh, when this thing comes, we react. So so anti-nutrients in food, phytotoxins, plant poisons. So phytic acid is another unstable storage form of phosphorus, and it needs a few more things to become whole. I believe it's calcium, magnesium, and a few other things. So that going into your body, it's going to leach really important nutrients like calcium and magnesium.
So what foods have that?
Phytic acid. So we've got oatmeal, oats, we've got wheat, we've got certain nuts, so almonds. So almost every seed needs a good amount of preparation. Don't go eating tons of raw nuts. Don't just cook up oatmeal, soak it in water and yogurt first. Beans benefit from a very long soaking period, a very slow, long cooking period.
It's interesting because most cultures outside the US, you have beans, they've been soaked overnight at a very low temperature.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Maybe with some lemon juice or whey
Yeah.
or salt, like
Yeah.
something to help deactivate. Let's see. Those are some of the key ones. Really, really, the main two are processed sugar and even natural sugars in really high quantities. The way that we process sugar in the body, it lets off a free radical.
Yeah.
Like it just is. And now the more whole the form of sugar is, the more you should have antioxidants or some nutrients that help the body do what it does. And the more you're having quality foods along with that sugar, along with that natural fruit or whatever, the more you can put out those fires as soon as they go. So as soon as the free radical comes out, it runs into an antioxidant and just goes out immediately.
Yeah.
So, but if you're doing processed sugar, it's way more free radicals, way less quality nutrition, and it's just a much bigger fire and harder to put out.
All right.
So tons of sugar.
And that's what the processed sugars, like, well, the big thing to look for, like, on a like day-to-day living is, what are the added sugars? If it's added, just stay away from it.
Typically, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's something like 43 names for sugar. I think there's 43 different names that the FDA allows people to say. And on a lot of labels, you'll see 10 or more of those names used.
Yeah.
So that way it doesn't show up as the number one ingredient.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have new sugars that haven't yet been categorized as sugars. They still end in the ose ending, like lactose, glucose, meaning it has that molecular structure of a sugar, but they don't call it a sugar. I think a good example of this is sucrose or sucralose, something like that.
Yeah.
They can add that. It makes it sweet. It basically is a sugar, and they can say 0 grams of sugar. It's wild. It's the weirdest thing ever.
Yeah.
And terrible for health.
So a big thing on that level is the refined carbs and then added sugars. Like for the average person who doesn't speak the language in here, right? Stay away from refined carbs, stay away from added sugars.
Yeah, so refined carbs, refined carbohydrates, those are chains of sugar. A carbohydrate is just a big chain of sugar. Now, the more whole the form, the more you have other nutrients, the slower it breaks down, the slower the fire gets lit, the more nutrients you have to deal with it, then it's more okay. So like a quality whole sourdough loaf, that's more like a holistic form and more broken down versions of sugar. That's more okay. But
right, and all of our kids are very gluten sensitive, but sourdough bread is like, we can do that all day long.
That's awesome.
They don't have the same impact. So that kind of leads way into the next, like, what's the impact like on other things, right? So there's a lot of things, like you cut your finger, we all have the same effect. We bleed, right? Like we're going to bleed, something's going to happen. The symptoms of whatever, like a lot of us, the symptoms are the same for many things, but gluten or processed or refined carbohydrates can have a myriad of impacts on our physical health, right? For one of my sons, it's irritability, right? For one of my oldest daughter, she's not going to be happy about this, super gassy, right? Another one of my sons gets bloated, right? I get bloated, right? And so some of the symptoms, people are like, oh, I'll just deal with it because I don't feel like it's a big deal. But then they wonder, why is my gut so big, right? But other people, it's very debilitating, right? And then even all the way to something like celiac, right? What are some other impacts of these foods on our physical health?
Yeah, you hit quite a few of them. Let's see here. So poor energy. I don't know if you know poor energy. That's a huge one. If you're having these anti-nutrients and you're not having lots of traditional fats and oils, which we need for slow burn energy, and you're having lots of simple carbs that are like lighter fluid, simple carbs, you have a quick burst energy, and then you tank. Energy is a huge one. If you don't have stable energy, it's hard to work a consistent job and have a long shift and not need to go take a nap. It powers your brain. Like, you need energy to power your brain. You're not going to think as clearly or as long, as well, as creatively.
And a lot of that's related to our blood sugar levels, right? Because you have a lot of these faults. Like, I mean, type 2 diabetes like I'm going to butcher the statistic. I'm not even going to put it out there, but basically pre 1975 didn't really exist among children.
Mm-hmm.
Fatty liver disease did not exist among children,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a whole term called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which basically says kids with fatty liver disease, right?
Mm.
And a lot of this is related to our uh, um, glucose intolerance or glucose blood sugar levels, glucose sensitivity, not regulating properly, giving diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Weight
gain. And so if you think about like the number one diseases out there, we have cardiovascular diseases and we have diabetes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then coming in third as a group are all these chronic illnesses,
Mm-hmm.
right? All related to food.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess kind of when you brought up energy, how many of us feel like the 3 o'clock slump? We talk about that as if it's happened for millennia.
Like it's just a normal thing we've always had.
It's like,
it's new.
honey, I'd
It's
love
very
to go
new.
hunting and kill some mammoth, but it's 3,
And
and you know how I get at 3 o'clock. You know.
Also, don't talk to me before I've had my coffee.
That's right. Don't. Right. Yeah.
No mammoth slaying before my coffee.
Right. So energy is a big deal.
Yeah. And I'd love to talk about my housemate if I may.
Yeah, let's talk about that because we did it earlier. So he would typically eat like a bowl of cereal, and then 90 minutes later, be like, "I'm starving," and then you did what?
So I make that soured oatmeal, the old-fashioned way to do porridge. You roll the oats, you soak the oats in. I roll the oats. You don't have to. That's kind of my above and beyond thing. Freshness, right? So I soak my oatmeal in water and yogurt, and then I cook it with salt, and then I add butter and maple syrup and maybe nuts and fruit if I have it around. My housemates love it. Many have asked me to teach them how to make it, and I have. Whenever I make it, and I'm like, "Hey, I have extra. Do you want some?" They're like, "Heck yeah!" So I give my housemate this oatmeal, and he has a big old bowl of it, and he's like, "Man, that's so good, really, really good." And I'm like, "Hey, do me a favor. This time, pay attention to when's the next time you're hungry, and maybe eat before you're hungry. I don't know, but think about when's the next time you're hungry. Please pay attention to that. Let me know when it is." He ate around like 10:30 ish. And he's like, "Okay, but it's gonna be really soon."
Normally about noon, he'd be like.
Normally, like maybe noon, he'd come in for another bowl or some other food. He'd feel hungry again, and so I'm like, "Pay attention. Let me know when you feel hungry again." He's like, "It probably won't be very long. I have a really fast metabolism," which we could get into what a misnomer metabolism and it being fast or not. It's not what you think, and maybe we'll get into it. Maybe we won't. Maybe another episode, but. He's like, "I think it won't be long." I'm like, "That's fine. Just let me know." So later that night, I get home. He's like, "Dude, I didn't even think about food until about 4. And I started to get kind of a little hungry, kind of more like I should probably eat by now. Wasn't very hungry. Didn't think about food before that. Just went, sustained energy. That's like 5.5 hours when normally he needs like an hour and a half. So quality fat, we can run for so long, and especially if we don't throw it off with a ton of sugar and a ton of seed oils, which again, inflammation, we need energy to combat that, and then we get hungry sooner. And that makes me need to mention the lab rat thing about.
Oh yeah.
They took two sets of lab rats, and they feed one just gets water, another one gets water and puffed extruded breakfast cereals. The ones getting the cereals died sooner than the ones getting no food.
But hey, it's heart health.
It's heart healthy. I lowered my cholesterol.
Right.
Cholesterol is a good thing.
It's interesting because a lot of people think, "Oh, I need to eat. I'm going to go work out, or I just worked out. I need to eat, get energy," and you don't. Like for those watching, like here's energy in my cheeks, right? Like I got some fat storage here. I'm right at I'm a healthy, very healthy weight, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I can go work out without needing to eat and gain energy. My body will either create it, will take what is already here, create that energy, or pull from some fat reserves, right?
Yeah.
I see a lot of guys who are like, "Oh, I would love to do that diet, but I'm a male. I should be taking in more calories than females." Like, well, you're a male, but you're like 100 pounds overweight. Energy availability is not your problem. Like, I know calories is not like the big thing, but people new to this get locked into the calorie out topic, and that's really not the case. Like, we have plenty of energy within us, but it's whether we can stay alert. It's whether we have the nutrients to keep us functioning to go along with that energy, right?
Right.
I think that's where this quality food comes into play. Is if your energy doesn't have something to turn it on, you're not going to use it. Would you agree with that? Or?
Yeah. And so exercise can be helpful in that, and so the body has two ways of burning energy. One is running on fat, and one is running on sugar.
Yeah.
And so maybe someone works out and most of their meals are simple carbohydrates and sugar. They work out and all of a sudden they have really low blood sugar and they feel like they're going to die if they don't eat.
Yeah.
Now they haven't switched over to fat burning yet.
Right.
And that can be burning the fat that you eat. It can be burning the fat that's on you. And Dr. Kate has a great book called The Fat Burn Fix. And that's about healing that fat burning ability within you and staying in that fat burning mode. And that's ketogenics.
Yeah, ketosis. A lot of people hear about ketosis. Right?
Yeah. So running on fat is keto, and that's what we mostly want to do. So
I do want to point out keto is very popular, and running on fat is very important. But it's like if you have a hybrid car that has gas and electric. If you avoid the gas altogether, eventually that gas engine is not going to work. So you do need to. Your body does need some. There's a term called metabolic flexibility. I don't know if you've heard of it. Your body does need the ability to have to switch back and forth between burning sugars and burning fats, but it's in the healthy right ways. Like, you don't want to get used to, oh, I need another candy bar. That's not the sugars we're talking about needing to burn. We're talking about sugars that come from good fruits, from quality carbs, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that to a large degree. I have in that book I mentioned, it talks about how the body can actually make sugar out of fat. It's a pretty complex system, and so if it needs sugar, it can make it out of fat. I don't advocate having no sugar or having no simple. Or,
no, you put
no
syrup on your oatmeal.
Yeah, totally.
You obviously don't advocate no sugar.
Yeah, totally.
Right. Yeah.
But our primary source of energy has been for much of human history and should still be fats and oils.
There's a lot of people who will like if you're to structure your day for like using food as fuel, they say one, protein's needed throughout the entire day, right? Protein's a very essential part. Like if you're talking macros, right? The macros being fats, carbs, and protein, right? So protein's an essential part of that, but start with your quality carbs early because that's a fast source of energy. It's the sugar because it's immediate, right? But get through that pretty soon in the day and start going into your fat burn and ending the day with, because if you're adding sugar at the end of the day through carbohydrates, then you're impacting sleep. You're, I don't know, just starting the day off with good quality carbs, that's a good way to just get going faster. But then you tap into that fat storage and that fat burn for the longevity for the rest of the day.
Yeah, this is.
I know it's not like a perfect explanation.
Sure.
But like if you could map out like, oh cool, I'm gonna have like good protein, a good like your soaked oats early on in the day, right?
Yeah.
But you're not having soaked oats at night.
Typically no.
Always, right.
But the soaked oats also
not
have a lot
that
of
you
fat.
can't. Not that you can't. Okay,
Sure.
all right.
Yeah.
But other grains, right, may not have it, right?
Sure.
So, but if you can transition into that fat burning for that sustained energy, getting past 3:00, getting into the night, and then you're not storing that sugar when you go to bed at night, right? Because you're not using it.
Yeah, this is a big topic, and
probably another discussion.
Maybe another discussion to really get into it really briefly, and it'd be good for us to talk more about this and kind of like figure out, because it's very complicated. I would say personally, I like to try to start with a pretty fatty breakfast with carbs too. So maybe sourdough toast,
Right.
maybe the oatmeal, but having bacon, having eggs, having butter. But the carbs are great to help with energy to digest that heavy fat because it takes a lot of energy to digest it, but then it gives a ton of energy too. So if you just do high fat in the morning, you're probably going to be a little bit sluggish. So it is good to have some carbs in the morning. At night, I don't advocate like a really high fat meal, right? For dinner, because then you're going to have this slow digesting heavy fat in your belly.
Oh, interesting.
So I would put it kind of like this. Breakfast is some carbs, a good amount of fat. Lunch is like a good mixture of everything. You got a little bit of carbs, you got a lot of fat, you got a decent amount of protein. Dinner is more protein and not super heavy on fat and not super heavy on sugar either.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a very simplistic summary of kind of how I feel about it. I don't feel like you have to pay too much attention to that if you're really doing a good job with your diet.
And a lot of us are different. A lot of us will respond differently to it. So you got to kind of find that mix that works for you too, right?
Totally.
But what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So because oftentimes when I go work out, instead of reaching for like an energy bar, I'll reach for like a half an avocado.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good piece out of the recovery meal. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyways, cool. Hey, we're kind of winding up on our time. I just want to kind of close out for people. Couple of things. I also want to say that food has a big impact on your mental health. Mm-hmm. We talked about this earlier, and this is just me kind of adding to the conversation more, is your diet impacts so much of your body's ability to do, right? If you're having problems sleeping at night, look at your diet. What's the impact on it? If you're having behavioral issues or your children, it could be because their body's not responding, not taking in nutrients. So they're grumpy, right? Like we hear the term, I'm hangry, right? Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? Kids can be hangry too, right? And so if they're not eating right in the morning, if you're feeding them crappy breakfast or these crappy breakfast bars that are just pure sugar, mm-hmm. then they go to school and they get low quality pizza or burritos that are devoid of anything nutritious. Mm-hmm. And they come home and they back talk to you. Don't blame them. Your kids are probably good. They just have nothing in them that helps them be a good human being. Right? And so when you're troubleshooting a lot of these behavioral issues, emotional issues, relationship stuff, I highly recommend starting with diet. It's like we talked about kind of being like a word problem. Like get rid of all the stuff that's not important so you can find out what the real problem is. Mm-hmm. And get rid of the soda. You don't need soda. Get rid of the refined carbs. You don't need those. Get rid of the added sugars. You don't need those. When you start eliminating things you don't need and start replacing them with things that you do need, right? You're quickly going to identify what the real problems are. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people do have real problems that aren't food related, mm-hmm. but you don't know what they are because if your food is so bad, the real problems are covered up by problems that are unnecessary and easily solved by changes to the diet.
You can't find the real problem like trauma in a flaming house that's on fire with inflammation. You can't find that. You can't go about it and find it skillfully if you don't first put out the fire and avoid the sugars and the seed oils.
Right.
If I may, really quickly, I'd love to kind of summarize kind of how I'm seeing this podcast.
Summarize it and then give some people advice on also if I'm just like your run-of-the-mill mom, run-of-the-mill dad, maybe college student, and I don't have time to put in all the research you put in. I don't have time to do you've obviously put in years of work, right? And study, and a lot of people in this field have, but the common person doesn't.
Sure.
So how do we do something meaningful about what we've just spent 90 minutes on?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So first, kind of the summary, near the beginning, we talked about quality ingredients. And then in the end, we talked about quality of life and how quality ingredients can lead to quality of life. Now, what's in between there? What's in between there is knowing how to prepare those quality ingredients to give you high quality of life. And to do that, there's technique, there's technology, there's tradition, there's how we've done things for so long to make food more bioavailable and less damaging, to have longer life, better quality of life, better functioning of our bodies and minds and spirits. So what is and so what that makes me think of is there's no shortcuts to the top, but you can make it much easier by focusing on the 20% of the effort that leads to the 80% of the results. And so I would say the 20% to give you those really great results are check labels for commercial seed oils. So again, this is soy, corn, sunflower, safflower, canola, and I'm missing another big main one, and there's several others too. Those are the key ones. And instead go for olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, and a lot of these, the less refined and the more, organic and well-made, the better. Butter, cream, lard, bacon fat, pig fat, tallow, ghee. These are all traditional fats and oils that have been around a long time. Those other ones I listed, the corn, the soy, that's new that we have the technology to completely destroy those oils by extracting them and putting them through these processes. So prioritize good fat and run away from bad fat. When you go out to eat, don't get fried foods, because almost everywhere you go, they're going to fry it in a canola oil or some other vegetable oil or soy oil. So if you have to go out to eat and it's not the best food, don't get fried food. Fry food at home in good fats and oils. I fry things in lard, and it's the most delicious thing ever. I made my own corn dog, deep frying it in lard. It's fantastic. Do it at home. Find a cool place like Redmond's that does it in coconut oil. But in general, don't eat those things. So if it's low quality food, run away from the fats and oils in general. And then avoid high quantities of sugar. Just doing that can do amazing things for you. When you have coffee, if you have coffee, adding butter to it or adding coconut oil to it. So really prioritizing those fats, running on fats, including in the morning, maybe a bit more sugar and carbs in the morning, but definitely making sure you're getting that slow burning fat to have that energy to find quality ingredients and to learn about how to prepare them. Have a salad now and then of soft, easy to chew things, not kale, not chard. Those things need to be steamed to make them digestible. I'm not a big advocate of supplements in general, but if you're going to do supplements, or a supplement that I do and that I love is fermented cod liver oil. That's a really great vitamin A and vitamin D supplement. It's very hard to find quality vitamin A and D in the diet these days.
And they're called supplements, not replacements, for a reason.
Right. Yeah. It helps
and
out.
Treat them like supplements. Don't treat them like replacements.
Your one-a-day multi doesn't mean you can eat whatever you want.
Right. Exactly.
Especially not seed oils. So those are some big ones. What else? Having a mixture, having some raw, having some cooked, having some muscle meat, having some organ meat. Go to your farmer's market and get fresh ingredients. Make friends who are foodies. Oh, this is a good one. I was reading it. Atomic Habits is a great book, and it talks about building good habits.
It's written by a guy named James Clear, for those who want to know.
It's so good. He talks about if you want to make a habit normal in your life, make friends with people and groups that it's a normal habit. So if you want to climb, make friends with a group of climbers.
Yeah.
If you want to find good places to eat and learn how to prepare good food, make friends with a group of foodies. Go on meetups.com, go to slowfoods.com and find a group and go there and make friends and talk about food and talk about what's good and bad and have different opinions and research it and figure it out.
And listen to other podcasts.
Listen to another podcast.
Yeah.
If I were to give just one book, if you're sold on this idea and you don't need to research the deep inner workings of food on the molecular level, like I did in Deep Nutrition, which is thick and crazy, it's very deep, by the same author is Food Rules. Michael Pollan also writes a book called Food Rules. I haven't read that one. This is Food Rules by Dr. Catherine Shanahan. And it's just the what to do. It's much smaller. It's much easier. And it's just like,
He doesn't work for like, this is just straight up like fanboy stuff. Right?
I'm just big fanboy, big fanboy.
Yeah.
She saved my life, turned my health around. It's just like, do some stretching now and then, and here's some basic ways to do it. Make sure you're having good quality butter that's eating grass, and that'll help a ton. It's just like quick and dirty what to do, and enough about why to be like, oh, that makes absolute sense, without getting deep into the weeds and really, really understanding it intricately.
Sweet. Well, this has been awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
I'm going to put, if you want to follow him on Instagram, I know I'll put them in the notes in the description. But
Health Coach Jesse on Instagram.
That's
Send me a message.
Jesse, right?
Jesse.
So Health Coach Jesse on Instagram. Sweet.
Cool.
All right. Hey, thanks people for listening. And remember, like this way of living, like if you improve your diet, right, you will become more of a functional person. If you're dysfunctional now, if you're already functional, you're going to be more qualified to overcome the hard stuff, whether it be chronic illness, the becoming tired,
Argument at work.
Yes, right. But all of that is a big impact, and that's truly what we're about here today. It's not about eating this for the sake of eating it. It's eating it for the sake of having the life we want, confidently overcome the hard stuff, ambitiously become who we want to be, and a great diet, the way we've talked about today, following these principles, these guidelines, what works for you is going to really help you do that. So again, thanks for being with us. Appreciate you. It's been fascinating. I know we're going to be talking a lot more about this off here, but thanks guys for listening. If you made it all the way to the end, you're the best. We appreciate you. You have a good one.
Thanks so much. Cool.
Sweet.